When we witness someone else's joy or success, our reactions can reveal profound truths about our psychological makeup. While many respond with genuine happiness for others, some experience a darkening of spirit, a complex emotion that manifests as jealousy and, in its most troubling expression, cruelty. This phenomenon represents one of the more challenging aspects of human interpersonal dynamics, the capacity to transform another's happiness into a source of personal pain and subsequently, to inflict suffering in return. Before examining how jealousy transforms into cruelty, we must first understand jealousy itself, particularly as it relates to others' happiness, a phenomenon sometimes referred to as envy in psychological literature, though the terms are often used interchangeably in everyday language. Jealousy in response to others' happiness involves a complex interplay of emotions, cognitions, and behaviors triggered by perceiving another person experiencing positive outcomes or emotions. This form of jealousy is distinct from romantic jealousy, which centers on threats to a valued relationship. Instead, this variant focuses on the perceived imbalance between one's own emotional state and that of another. Psychologists distinguish between two types of jealousy relevant to our discussion. 1. Benign jealousy, characterized by admiration and inspiration. This form motivates self-improvement without ill will toward the target. 2. Malicious jealousy, marked by hostility and resentment. This variant focuses on diminishing the other person's advantage rather than personal growth. It is this second form, malicious jealousy, that most commonly leads to cruel behaviors. Research in effective neuroscience has begun to illuminate the neural mechanisms underlying jealousy. Functional MRI studies reveal that observing others' success or happiness activates regions associated with social pain, particularly the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex and anterior insula, the same areas activated during experiences of physical pain and rejection. Simultaneously, there is decreased activity in reward centers of the brain that would normally activate in response to positive stimuli. This neurological pattern creates an experience where another's joy literally causes discomfort while diminishing one's capacity to experience positive emotions. These findings help explain why jealousy can feel so viscerally unpleasant, and why it might trigger defensive or aggressive responses. The brain processes others' happiness as a form of threat when jealousy is activated. At the heart of jealousy lies social comparison, our tendency to evaluate ourselves in relation to others. Festinger's social comparison theory provides a foundation for understanding this process, suggesting that humans have an innate drive to evaluate their opinions, abilities, and circumstances by comparing themselves to others. When these comparisons are upward, comparing to those perceived as better off, they can trigger negative emotions, particularly when the comparison domain is highly relevant to self-worth. The comparison target is perceived as similar, suggesting the achievement should have been attainable. The gap between self and other seems difficult to close. The success is perceived as undeserved. These factors create what researchers call painful upward comparisons that heighten jealous responses and set the stage for potential cruelty. Another key psychological component in jealousy-driven cruelty is the perception of happiness as a limited resource. This scarcity mindset fosters zero-sum thinking, the belief that another's gain must necessarily represent one's own loss. Studies in behavioral economics and social psychology demonstrate that when resources, material or emotional, are perceived as scarce, individuals become more competitive and less cooperative. Applied to happiness, this suggests that those operating from a scarcity mindset may view others' joy as diminishing their own potential for happiness, creating a perceived need to rebalance the emotional economy, often through bringing others down rather than lifting themselves up. The progression from jealousy to cruelty often involves psychological defense mechanisms that protect the ego from the pain of comparison. 1. Devaluation, diminishing the importance or validity of another's happiness. She's only happy because she's shallow and easily pleased. 2. Rationalization, creating logical-sounding explanations for why the other's happiness is undeserved or illusory. He just got lucky. It won't last. 3. Projection, attributing one's own negative feelings to the target. He's not really happy, he's just pretending to make others envious. 4. Reaction formation, converting jealousy into expressions of superiority or judgment. I feel sorry for people who need external validation to be happy. These mechanisms serve to protect self-esteem but often at the cost of empathy and connection, creating psychological distance that makes cruelty more feasible. From a functional perspective, cruelty toward those we envy can serve as a maladaptive form of emotional regulation. Research in emotion regulation shows that when individuals experience negative emotions they cannot effectively process or tolerate, they may engage in behaviors that provide short-term relief. For the person experiencing painful jealousy, acts of cruelty can temporarily restore a sense of power and control, reduce the painful discrepancy by bringing the other person down, create distance from the threatening comparison, provide validation through others who join in the criticism, offer distraction from their own painful feelings. This explains why cruelty can feel momentarily satisfying despite its ultimately destructive nature. It provides immediate emotional regulation at the cost of long-term psychological and relational health. Central to the jealousy-cruelty connection is the threat that others' happiness can pose to one's self-concept. According to self-discrepancy theory, seeing others succeed or experience joy in areas where we feel deficient creates awareness of the gap between our actual self and our ideal or ought selves. This awareness can be deeply threatening, particularly for individuals whose self-worth is contingent on external validation or comparison. Rather than integrating this information and adjusting self-perceptions, some respond by attacking the source of the threat, the happy individual, in an attempt to preserve their self-concept. Research shows that individuals with fragile self-esteem, high but unstable, are particularly prone to this defensive aggression compared to those with either securely high or consistently low self-esteem. Jealousy-driven cruelty does not occur in a vacuum. It emerges within specific social contexts that can either amplify or mitigate its expression. Several contextual factors influence how jealousy manifests in interpersonal relationships. 1. Status hierarchies. In environments with rigid or competitive status structures, others' happiness can represent a threat to one's position, increasing the likelihood of hostile responses. 2. Cultural norms around expression of success. Some cultures promote modest displays of achievement and happiness, while others encourage more overt celebration. 3. Group dynamics. Within groups, jealousy-driven cruelty can become normalized or even rewarded if it aligns with group values or serves group purposes such as maintaining conformity. 4. Power imbalances. Those with more power may use cruelty to maintain their position, while those with less may use it as an attempt to regain some control. Research in organizational psychology has documented how these dynamics play out in workplaces, where colleagues' successes can trigger undermining behaviors, gossip, and sabotage, particularly in highly competitive environments or those with limited advancement opportunities. Cruelty triggered by others' happiness takes various forms, ranging from subtle to overt. 1. Derogation and criticism. Finding fault with the happy person or their accomplishments. 2. Joy-killing, deliberately introducing negative information or perspectives to diminish positive feelings. 3. Exclusion and ostracism, cutting the person off from social connection or support. 4. Schadenfreude, taking pleasure in the misfortunes that befall the previously happy individual. 5. Direct sabotage, actively working to undermine another's success or happiness. 6. Triangulation, speaking negatively about the person to mutual connections damaging their reputation. 7. Passive-aggressive behaviors, offering backhanded compliments or showing subtle signs of disdain. These behaviors create toxic relationship patterns that can persist over time, damaging both the target and ultimately the perpetrator of cruelty. The impacts of jealousy-driven cruelty extend beyond the immediate emotional harm to create lasting relational damage. Erosion of trust. When cruelty is detected, it fundamentally damages the trust necessary for healthy relationships. Reciprocal negativity. Targets may respond with their own defensive or aggressive behaviors, creating cycles of hostility. Group contagion. Negative behaviors can spread through social networks, creating cultures of comparison and criticism. Relational distancing. Both parties typically withdraw emotionally, reducing relationship quality and satisfaction. Identity damage. Repeated exposure to cruelty can harm the target's sense of self and diminish authentic expression. Longitudinal studies show that relationships characterized by these dynamics tend to either terminate or persist in chronically unsatisfying states, highlighting the importance of addressing these patterns early. Cognitive behavioral approaches address the thoughts and behaviors that maintain cruelty patterns. First, there's cognitive restructuring. This involves identifying and challenging automatic negative thoughts about others' happiness, like thinking, their success means I'm a failure, and replacing them with more balanced perspectives. Next, we have behavioral experiments. These are about testing assumptions regarding others' happiness through structured observations and gathering evidence about its true impact on one's own opportunities. And then, there's skills training. This focuses on developing healthier responses to others' good news through techniques like active constructive responding. This technique involves authentic engagement with others' positive experiences. Since maladaptive social comparison drives much of jealousy, interventions targeting these processes show promise. 1. Downward comparison redirection, balancing upward comparisons with awareness of those in less fortunate circumstances, promoting gratitude. 2. Temporal comparison emphasis, focusing on personal growth over time rather than comparison to others. 3. Selective comparison, choosing comparison domains and targets strategically to inspire rather than threaten. And 4. Values clarification, identifying personal values to reduce the impact of comparisons in non-priority areas. Drawing from the evidence-based approaches above, a comprehensive intervention framework emerges. First, awareness. Developing conscious recognition of jealousy, triggers, associated thoughts, and behavioral tendencies. Next, acceptance. Cultivating non-judgmental acknowledgement of jealous reactions without shame or denial. Then, alternatives. Building a repertoire of healthier responses to others' happiness. And finally, action. Implementing new behaviors consistently while monitoring outcomes. Alex, a marketing professional, recognized a pattern of undermining colleagues who received praise or promotions. Through therapy utilizing the four-component model, Alex identified childhood experiences of conditional approval that created a performance-based self-worth. Developed mindfulness skills to recognize the physical tension and racing thoughts that signaled jealousy. Practiced self-compassion when comparison was triggered. Created personalized celebration responses for colleagues' successes. And established a comparison journal to track triggers and response improvements. Jealousy in response to others' happiness represents a deeply human challenge, a shadow cast by the light of others' joy. Yet as the evidence reviewed here demonstrates, this response is neither inevitable nor immutable. Through conscious awareness, compassionate understanding, and consistent practice of alternative responses, individuals can transform the pain of comparison into opportunities for connection and personal growth.